Hi, I'm Dajana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today on my podcast, I have a very special guest. I have Tracy Gillett with me today. Tracy is the founder of Raised Good. Hi, Tracy. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here. Well, you were on my first summit when we talked about parenting with self-compassion. And I just love the message that you have for parents, which is all about like parenting from your own parenting intuition. And I know you focus a lot on the natural way that we were really created to parent our children. But to start off with, could you tell us a little bit about what it means to parent, to be a natural parent or to parent more consciously in modern society?
Yeah, sure. And it's a hard one, isn't it? Like we were talking
Mhm.
about before we started recording. It's certainly how we were designed to parent, but in modern society that can be hard. And we have so much social conditioning that goes around so many things, like where
Yeah.
babies are supposed to sleep, how toddlers are supposed to behave, whether or not tantrums are okay.
Mhm.
Um, And we bring into parenthood all of this conditioning that we have around how we expect children to be. And children are nothing like what society
The
expects them to
boxes
be.
we put them in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have so much left over from behaviorism.
Yeah.
These ideas that children should be seen and not heard. And while we don't say things like that, we kind of still believe it, that
Hmm.
our babies should very quickly fit into our schedules, that toddlers shouldn't really interrupt us too much and stuff like that. We want to, bounce back and have our pre-baby life back. And really, if that's what we wanted, then having children, it's like one of the most inconvenient things that you can ever do in your life, isn't it? It's not something that you do to make life simpler.
Yeah.
But it's one of the most magical things that you can possibly do. And I think surrender is just such an amazing word when we're mothers. We often think of surrender as being this dirty word, it's the white flag, it's giving up. But surrendering to how our babies and children actually are. And when we do that, and when we know that babies are, naturally designed to wake up through the night, but how can we manage that? When we know that toddlers are supposed to have big meltdowns, how can we be there for that? Then that really opens us up to be able to find our own intuition. If we can block out that white noise of society that's telling us to let the baby cry it out or put it in a separate room in a crib or put that toddler in a timeout, if we can block those things out and really start to tap into our intuition, then I think that's really where we start to find our confidence as parents, and really start to find our power to parent. Gordon Neufeld talks about attachment so beautifully, and
Mhm.
how attachment unfolds over the first 6 years of life. And if those things are unfolding well, then children, they want to be guided by us. They want us to lead them. They want to please us. Um, and so we really want to use attachment, I don't want to say to our advantage, but this
Yeah.
is the tool that Mother Nature gave us. And when we kind of squander that, when we use that against children, when we
Hmm.
count to three at the playground, we're going in, if you don't come, like, come on, I'm counting to three, 1, 2, 3. Well, a 2-year-old is going to very quickly come with you to the car, and you'll think, well, that worked. Like, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
But what you've done is that you've used connection against them, because the last thing that they want to do is lose their connection to their parent. So they will do anything to keep that. What you've also done is put alarm into their system, and that's going to come out sometime later. Frustration,
Hmm.
could be a tantrum
Hmm.
later in the day.
Hmm.
So yeah, natural parenting for me. Um, and I think, there's so many words out there like positive parenting, gentle parenting, conscious parenting. Like, I think every word is taken. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think we're all kind of saying the same kind of thing. And I said natural parenting just to try to put some kind of word to it when I started writing about it. Really just thinking, if we were just dropped on a deserted island and we had no baby store, We had no books, we had no experts telling us what to do. We had no Google to search. How would we parent? And it's stripping it back and getting back to that. And it's also thinking, how do our children expect to be parented? You know, how are they born into this world? What do babies truly need? What do toddlers truly need? You know, things like play that we've come to think is kind of frivolous. And we've replaced it with organized sports or activities or extracurriculars where adults are bossing kids around and telling them what to do instead of just letting them play. And that being something that's so important for kids. So yeah, for me, natural parenting is just really about, like, it's not any kind of checklist, or you don't have to baby wear or co-sleep or breastfeed or any of these things. It's figuring out what those things certainly often feature, but they're not necessarily right for every parent or every child. So it's about being responsive to your kid, and figuring out what works for your family. But yeah, really just trying to do it your way instead of following somebody else's prescription.
Oh, that's such a great summary of it. You know, as you were talking about the example of like, what would you do if you were stranded on an island and you didn't have this environmental pressure of society and um, just, I guess, the cultural expectations of other people? If it was just you and your family and your child, you would just be responsive to what the needs are of this child, because that you're trying to like go back to harmony, right? If there's disruption and disconnection, you're trying to get back into sync with this family that you have on this island. So like, what does it take to get back into harmony? It means that everybody gets their needs met, right? And so you're just like you're saying, each child is different and unique. So you're just going to respond to whatever each unique person on that island needs so that their cup is full, and you can move on to, like, you know, getting the coconuts or whatever, or washing the laundry in the ocean or whatever, right? It's like very responsive to whatever the need is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's about not saying, well, just the child gets everything and the parents get nothing. It's not
Yeah.
about either or. It's about how do we, and obviously when you're a brand new parent and you have a newborn, their needs are just monumental. Like, that's not the time when, you know, we're going to get to do everything that we want to do as parents. Like, but yeah, it's about trying to get all of the needs within, as many of the needs within the family met as possible, which is hard. Like, we live in a society where, you know, we have so many demands put on us. And just thinking of that vision of you describing, like, being on that island, I'm like, I want to go to that island. Like,
I think that's why
I don't
parents
want
love,
any
at least.
emails.
Yeah, like it's like that's why moms are probably especially like love to go on vacation. It's like, oh, when we go to vacation, it feels like the world is left behind and I can just show up as a parent that I would be if I was living kind of on my own island, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it makes me think of like, how did we get there? How do we get here where we are? Like, where it's like now we need evidence-based research to teach us about responsiveness, even though it's actually intuitively built in us, but we've just like pushed it down so far we don't even recognize it, and we don't
Yeah.
even like have time for it. But how did we get to where we are today? And I'm just almost thinking like the history of society and like industrialized nations and the technological revolution. It's like all these advancements of humanity have been great for our survival over time, but they've taken something else away. They've
Yeah.
put more, we only have so many hours of daylight, right? That we're awake, and they've added all these things to our lives. But since you only have so much time, you've removed something. You've removed like downtime. You've removed time to respond to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, big time. And, you know, Kim John Payne talks a lot about this in his book, Simplifying Childhood, about those low notes that we need to intentionally build into our children's lives. You know, if we're just carting our kids from one thing to another, and expecting them just to be happy, and, you know, and if you are lucky that you do have a happy go with the flow, like easy breezy kid. But most kids, like, if I look at my calendar for the week ahead and I just see meeting after meeting after meeting, immediately I'm just like, oh, it's too much. Like,
Yeah,
I need
yeah,
some
yeah.
I need some of that downtime. And if you just go with what society wants, everyone is just going to take more. The boss is going to take more, the school's going to take more, the family's going to take more. Like, so it becomes this real practice of how do we use boundaries to really, make sure that we protect what our families need, us and our kids. That, doing nothing is really valuable. Like staying home.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that I realized as a new mum was just the idea that with every yes comes a no, and with every no comes a yes. Like if I say no to something, externally, then I'm saying yes to staying at home and having pancakes with my kid and doing puzzles and watching a movie or whatever that thing is. If we're constantly saying yes to the external, then it's very hard to, sort of invest in our family culture. So, so yeah, it's a matter of choice. Like you say, we all have just these 24 hours in a day, and we can't do it all. And it often looks like other people are doing it all. If we compare ourselves to others on social media, and I put in my I have a community, and I just put the question out to the mums yesterday and just said, hey, how y'all doing? Like, because I'm having a real rough time. Like we had this wild snowstorm a couple of days ago. There's branches down, there's trees down, we've had no power. Like it's just crazy, and I've got all this stuff going on, and other people in the group are like, oh, thank God, thank you for keeping it real. Like thank you for saying like it's hard. And other people like, this is what's going on for me, this is what's going on for me. So I think it's trying to be honest about our stories and share our stories, and because when we can see that we're not alone, it helps to make it easier. And when we can practice having boundaries as community, and really valuing simplifying things, then I think we can make space. We can do it all. We just can't do it all at the same time. That's what I try to remind myself when I'm like, I want to do all these different things, even in my business. I'm like, I have all these great ideas. I just can't do it all right now. I can do it all over the next 5 years.
I love that. Yeah. And I love how you're saying, like, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so it's a very conscious decision. Like, what do you want? You can say yes to that, or you can say no to that. And then there's also like an effect, an equal and opposite effect of something else happening or not happening. Then, like you said, it's just a matter of maybe when you do it, you just can't do it. You can't multitask because you're really never multitasking. You're just switching gears quickly, right?
Yeah.
And I love how you were saying like about the pressures of society, and then how the antidote to that is a sharing with other people that you're not alone. Because as I was thinking, like, why don't parents do natural parenting more? Why don't they parent like this more often? And I think it's because parents are like good people inside too. When they're not parenting like this, but they want to, something's getting in their way. And I feel like maybe what's getting in parents' way is this desire to belong as adults to society. So yes, there's this external pressure. It's not good for us. It's not good for our families, but we also fear rejection from the group. We fear being cast out and being left behind. And our survival instinct is like to belong. Well, if everybody's in a frenzy, we better go in there too, because it's better to be in a group and in a frenzy than to be maybe alone. And so, but then, like you're saying, finding a community of other like-minded parents where you can get both. You can get what you actually want to do, plus you can be part of a shared humanity, so that your fear instinct doesn't kick in about being an outsider and going completely against the grain, where you still belong and you find safety in that group. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I talk about this a lot. I have a little course called The Confident Parent, and it's it's all about that. And it's fascinating. Brené Brown talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And fitting in is giving up who you are for the group, and fitting in, being somebody else. I'm sure we can all, think of times when we've done that. If we're back with high school friends, or if we're back with, even when we go back into our families of origin, like, how do we change?
Right.
How do we fit in to survive?
Survival instincts.
And that's not the same as belonging. Belonging is not needing to change who we are. And being exactly who we are and being welcomed for that. And the first person that we need to belong to is ourselves. We need to not abandon ourselves. And this is where like reparenting and inner child work and all that stuff comes in. Being the parent now to that inner child who perhaps needed to fit in when they were younger. Now you can say, no, you don't need to change who you are to belong. And I think that's really important. And like you say, you know, we tend to find safety in numbers. Like, yeah, definitely. And sometimes that is really important. Like if I'm looking at, you know, buying something on Amazon and I haven't bought this thing before, the first thing I'm going to do is go and look at all the reviews. Like, what do
the
people
social
say?
proof.
Yeah, like that's good. Like that's good. That's like looking to the crowd to find out what's going on. But I'm not going to crowdsource my parenting. Like that is too important. And I need to make that decision for myself. And James Clear in Atomic Habits, he has this wonderful quote that says that most days, most people would rather be wrong with the crowd than right on their own.
Right.
And it takes a really conscious, and this is where this is the difference between being unconscious and just following along and just doing whatever everybody else does. And it's easier, you know, stick your kid in daycare when they're 1, whatever, 6 weeks, whatever, you know, go along with the crowd, do all these things that we're told that they need. They need that for socialization. No, they don't.
Yeah.
And all of these kinds of things that we're told, but it's leading us down a path of living a life that's not ours. And Bronnie Ware, she's a famous Australian author. She has a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, and she worked with people who were dying, and looking after them. And she started to notice these common regrets that were coming up for people. And so she wrote this book, 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the top regret was, I wish I had lived a life according to my own values, not somebody else's. So I'm not saying it's easy. Like I find it hard. Everyone finds it hard. I'm recording a summit at the moment and I'm asking every single person that I'm interviewing this question right at the end. Like, how do you follow your own path when those around you are judging you, questioning you, rolling their eyes at you? And it's not easy, but hard doesn't mean that it's wrong. So yeah, it's such a layered question. But finding a new community, I think, is one of the things. And even just having 1 or 2 people in real life, or finding a community online where you can just validate yourself and go, oh, I'm not crazy. There are a few other people out there doing this. Yeah, can really make a big difference.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when we can find even a minority, a group of people that's a minority, and we can use them as our group, that will become a place for us to soothe through that co-regulation when we feel dysregulated. And through like the research on self-compassion, we can also self-soothe, you know, and we can, you know, offer ourselves like kind of in our minds, like the common humanity, like other people go through this too. Maybe their circumstances are different. The situations are different, but you know, everybody feels like disconnection sometimes. It's important for me to do what's best for my family and kind of learn to self-soothe too. So I think it's definitely multifactorial.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about you know, what does natural parenting look like in action? And one of the probably more difficult questions parents come up against is how do you handle like big feelings, challenging behaviors with kids? Maybe we could talk a little bit about that and setting limits, especially. I know there's a little bit of a misconception about gentle parenting, that it's permissive parenting. And how does that kind of align with natural parenting in terms of like, we give our child what they need at the same time we set limits around certain things to support their development.
Yeah,
Or
for
to
sure.
even boundaries for ourselves so we can stay more self-regulated.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great question. And yeah, so I think it was Diane Baumrind who came up originally with the idea of like there's authoritarian parenting or authoritative parenting and like you said, permissive parenting. And so the authoritarian parent is like, my way or the highway, follow my rules, obey, like you're under my rule, that's it. And so very high expectations, not a whole lot of support. Permissive parenting is down the other end, where the kid just gets to do what they want. There's not so many rules. The parent is concerned about perhaps losing love from the child. So we're just going to give the kid what they want. You know, this breaks. Oh, it's okay, sweetheart. Like, we'll go get a new one, like that kind of thing. But then authoritative parenting is in the middle, which is, you know, we do have high expectations of our kids, but we also have a high level of support for our kids to get them through what they need. So it's having, first of all, it's having realistic expectations of what a child can do at certain ages. So we know that babies are only born with 25% brain development, and their brains don't fully mature until they're in their mid to late 20s. You know, it's different for boys and girls. It's different for birth order. You know, if you're first or second born, it can be different. So we're immature for a very long time. And so I think, first of all, it's checking our expectations. You know, is it realistic to expect the 2-year-old to have impulse control? Probably not.
Yeah.
So it's checking whether or not our expectations are realistic. But then when it comes time to saying, you know, this is, you know, we're not going to have like 3 cookies before dinner. You know, the authoritarian parent might just be like, no more cookies. I told you no, go to your room until you're ready to behave, you know, and come to dinner, whatever. Permissive parent might just give the 3 cookies. In the middle, what we're talking about is, I understand the cookies are so delicious. Like, you want another cookie. I want another cookie. Like, so holding space for the emotion, because emotions can never be wrong. You can never tell somebody else how they feel. You're not in their skin. Like, they feel like they really want the cookie. Why wouldn't they want the cookie? The cookie is way more delicious than dinner. So they want the cookie. So holding space for that emotion, letting that flow through them. And we can't have the cookie. We're not going to have another cookie. We're going to have dinner. And then the tears come, and then it's holding space for the tears. And it's okay to be upset about it. You know, we're looking after our health, and I can't let you have another cookie. And it's holding space for those emotions and whatever flows. And it's not our job to stop the tears. It's not our job to say, okay, that's enough. Like, that's enough. It's just a cookie. Like, get over it. It's our job is to be there for those tears. And so we're not trying to make our kids happy all the time. We're trying to let them experience the full range of emotions of disappointment and frustration and anger, as well as happiness and joy and laughter and silliness and all of those things, but in a way that supports them, that doesn't make them stuff their emotions down. Because Gordon Neufeld talks about, you know, the emotions really needing to flow and our children really needing to be able to feel them in order to eventually become mature emotionally. And if we don't let them feel all of those things, then we end up with a bunch of grown-ups walking around in grown-up bodies, but they're not grown up. Like, it's a bunch of children.
And it's such a myth.
Adult bodies.
Yeah, and it's such a myth in society that, you know, conventional parenting tells us like stop those emotions right now and act like a grown-up. Like, in other words, shove them down and hide them.
Yeah.
But in fact, the opposite is true.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that way of being, like this authoritarian kind of way of being, I remember being at a soccer game one time with my kid. Not a soccer game, it was just like soccer practice kind of thing. He was only 4. And you know, he was upset about something happened. He ran to me crying. I grabbed him. You okay, buddy? What happened? Just tell me all about it. And you know, grandpa behind me, what's that noise? Like, boys don't make that noise. And I felt so sorry for that grandpa. You know, he was never, and he's still not allowed to feel his emotions. He's still not allowing himself. And yeah, this way of parenting, it really, I don't agree with the term, like, don't agree with it. The term gentle parenting, I'm like, it's
Mhm.
not, it's gentle on the kid, but the parents are anything but gentle. I think parents that do this are like total badass parents because we are taking the
Yeah.
responsibility. Like we're
Yeah.
stepping up. It's harder.
Hmm.
It's harder
Hmm.
to be there with your kid during those emotions than it is to say, stuff it down. This is uncomfortable for me. This is really triggering me. This is making me feel uncomfortable hearing these tears. So you need to be quiet so that I don't feel uncomfortable. Like that's putting all of that onto the child's shoulders. The child is the immature one. The parent is the grown up or should be. And we decided to have kids. So it's our responsibility to take on the hard part. So yeah,
It's
that's
almost like
kind of the
leadership,
difference.
right? Like
Yeah, it
it's a
is.
leadership role, which is, leaders have to have soft skills,
Yeah.
but people don't really understand, I think, what that really means, kind of as a generality, because we don't welcome emotions generally. The soft skill is like a welcoming emotions and understanding that people are emotional as well as like, physical, mental, like intellectual beings, but they're also emotional beings. So if we like shut off that side of them and don't accept it, then they're not really performing at their best as like an employee or like a team member or a
Yeah.
child, right? They're not at their best.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think, Laura Markham talks about this in her work, Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson, the whole thing of like connect before you correct. Like you have
Mm-hmm.
to tap into someone's emotional brain first and empathize with the feelings before you can even think to get near their thinking brain. Like
Right, right.
um and this isn't something like if the kid's running across the street, you're just going to grab them, like, like
Mm-hmm.
safety. But in most circumstances, like teaching is never an emergency. The teaching can come an hour later, can come a day later, come 3 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
but dealing with the emotions in that moment is what's going to put you in a space so that your child can actually hear what you're saying. Because it doesn't matter how much we want to teach, it matters whether or not they can learn. And if they're not learning anything, it doesn't matter what's coming out of our mouths. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
really, yeah, hearing their emotions and being there for it can be really hard. I have a highly sensitive kid, so it feels like I'm sure you probably got one as well.
Yeah, I've
Um,
got one.
yeah, so man, it's like
Mm-hmm.
some days
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I don't have any more space for any more. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
it's
it
a
almost
lot.
requires you to like up level your parenting. You can't just cruise by because it's not enough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like you said, that's when all the self-compassion and all that stuff comes in because it's hard. It's not saying it's easy, but but it's amazing how quickly the emotions melt away. Like I struggle with disappointment as an emotion personally, and but I emotion coach my son through disappointment, and sometimes him and I will be disappointed about the same thing. And it's amazing how much more quickly he moves through it than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
better having, but I grew up like with my mum always taking away my disappointment, fixing it, making it better.
Mm,
And bless her, like, she's like incredible mum. And I totally understand because you want your kids to be happy. But
right.
but yeah, realizing that if we're doing that, it's actually not serving them.
Mm-hmm. They're not feeling that feeling and becoming familiar with it and understanding how to bounce back from it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for
That
sure.
resiliency. Ah, so amazing. I know we could talk a lot about this topic, and I didn't touch much on, I wanted to touch a little bit on sleep, but I don't know if we'll have the time. So as we wrap up, is there like a key message you would want parents to know, specifically those parents that feel like they have this like intuitive way to parent more naturally? It just feels like they're going against the grain and they're kind of really feel unsupported or in conflict with themselves and the world, but they do have this like strong drive. Any kind of words you would want to share with them as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think just yeah, sometimes you've got to go against the grain of society to be able to go with the grain of your own family. Like going with the flow of your child feels so much better than any discomfort that you get from going against society.
Mm,
And so I think really just stepping into that, trying to find community of people that get it. Really, I think, we spend so much time in our thinking brains trying to figure stuff out. And you touched earlier on the idea of, we now look to science to tell us what intuition is already telling us. And I certainly do that a lot, mainly just to, and it's amazing how often just the science just totally agrees with intuition. Like, and I do that because we've lost our way, and we almost need to prove our way back to it. But yeah, I think just looking to the child in front of you and what they really need and prioritizing them above anybody else. And it's amazing how much courage you'll find that you've actually got. And once you start pushing back, I think people are often just trying to help as well. Like if you've got a new baby or something and people are like, oh, breastfeeding's hard. Oh, you should just do formula or just do this or just sleep train if sleep training's hard, or pass me the baby or do this or do that. And they are just trying to help a new mum who, looks tired and exhausted and they're not really sure how else to help. So one thing that I do within my community is just give ideas for like acknowledging that person and saying, look, I know you're really trying to help right now. I'm not passing you the baby. But here are some ways that you could help. I would really love it if you could help with bath time, or I would really love it if you could help with this. So I think those around us, even though we can sometimes feel judged, I think they are just trying to find ways to help. So having compassion for that as well, and just steering them in a different direction. I hope those things help.
Yeah, it's kind of like going back
question.
to that confident. Yeah, I was going to say it kind of goes back to that confident parenting where if it feels like a judgment, if we can still stand in our own truth, at the same time, kind of try to see from their perspective what their intent is and kind of look for the win-wins. Like we can still get what we want with some boundaries and nonviolent communication and have them contribute in a way that still works with us, right? Like to kind of find that middle ground. When we become more confident in our own like ability to get our own needs met and parent the way we want, we can let more people in and set boundaries as appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. I also often do kind of perspective taking, a bit like what, Bronnie Ware has done so well with her, regrets of the dying, like picture yourself in the future and like how do you want to look back and think about the choices that you made and why you made them. I think that's really that often
powerful.
helps me. It can be powerful.
It pulls you out of that that kind of tunnel vision of the moment and the stress of the situation and look at the bigger picture. It becomes more expansive. Love that.
I think so many of us were raised to be people pleasers, and so I often say I'm a recovering people pleaser. And it's ironic because it's exactly what we're trying to reverse with our own kids. We're trying to teach them that we love them for who they are, not what they do. We don't love them because they got a, good grade or whatever. We just love them because they walked in the room and they're amazing and they don't need to do anything. There's nothing that they can do. Even when they're at their worst, we love them just as much, right? But so many of us were raised, our parents loved us just as much, but with this kind of conditional, and not just parents, like how we were raised in the school system and things like that. We were raised with this real conditionality of pleasing other people is, external validation and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a lot of undoing that, like you don't need external validation from others. You don't need others clapping you on for what you're doing. Like clap yourself on. I think is really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it makes me think of going back to self-soothing again. Like you want that approval because you feel the stress of not belonging, but you can self-soothe through this. It's almost like emotion coaching ourselves, like we would emotion coach our child through a difficult emotion, becoming familiar with it. Oh, amazing. So much good conversation. Would you share a little bit about a freebie or a resource the audience can get access to on your website, and we'll link it below?
Yeah, for sure. I'll send you the link. It's a free guide that I have, which is called the 5 Natural Parenting Secrets to get your kid to cooperate. Is that how it is? The 5 natural parenting secrets that will help your child cooperate. No timeouts, threats, or punishments required. So it's one of my favorites. So I think that fits really well with this conversation. So yeah, that's a great one to start with. Just with a lot of it is, you know, based on connection and yeah, really helping to go with the flow of your child and just naturally fostering connection rather than going for compliance. So yeah, I will share the link for that.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really great talking to you today. And I know people are going to find this valuable. So check out Tracy's resources. We have it linked below in the show notes. And we'll see you guys later. Thank you, Tracy, so much.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.